Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second Partner for Impact event, Sustainability with a Soul, the human side of saving the planet. Partner for Impact is a quarterly event series that highlights different issues within the context of building successful corporate and nonprofit partnerships. I'm Nancy Youssef, Chief Business Development Officer at Souls for Souls. For those of you who might not be familiar with us, Souls for Souls is a not-for-profit that turns shoes and clothing into opportunity by keeping those products from going to waste and putting them to good use in times of disaster relief, creating jobs, empowering people who are experiencing poverty, and so much more. We know that people today are looking to affect positive change through the purchases they make. The companies they choose to do business with and the individual actions they take, which means if your business doesn't have a compelling sustainability story, you're probably at a competitive disadvantage. Our aim for today's event is to give you inspiration, ideas, and insight into the human side of sustainability, so you can more effectively motivate and engage your customers and your employees, or just your community. During the next hour, we'll hear from Sam Darwin, co-founder of the Haitian American Caucus and a champion for education and empowerment for people in Haiti. From there, we'll transition to a panel moderated by writer and speaker Jamia Wilson, and featuring voices from outstanding brands and companies like Allbirds, The North Face, and SAP, as well as experts on sustainable business practices and consumer insights. If you have any questions for our panelists today, please feel free to submit them via the form just below the video event access page. With that, I am so proud to introduce our keynote speaker, Sam Darwin. Sam has been a longtime partner of Souls for Souls in Haiti. Collectively, Souls for Souls and the Haitian American Caucus receive shoes and send them to empower hundreds of women in Haiti to build successful entrepreneurial businesses. It is my pleasure to introduce Sam Darwin. As you might guess, internet connections in Haiti are not the most reliable. They're not the most reliable here in the US either. But so we asked Sam to record a short video, especially for this event, and he was more than happy to do so. Please welcome Sam Darwin.
My name is Samuel Darwin. I'm the Executive Director of the Haitian American Caucus, where we are currently doing this short video for all of you corporate executives. It is such a pleasure to be able to talk to you guys today. When I first got to Haiti in 2010, I realized one thing about everyone in Haiti. Everybody seemed to be selling something. Everyone had something that they were selling in order to feed their families, to send their kids to school, to provide themselves with health care. And I knew that that was important to the community that I was serving here in Croix-des-Bouquets. When we first started with our micro-entrepreneurship program, I realized that so many of our ladies were selling either produce or clothing or shoes. And in 2012, I sent an email to Souls for Souls saying, hey, I see you guys, come to Haiti on missions trips, and I would like to have a group come to my school and provide shoes for my students. And of course, I got an email back a day later saying, absolutely, we would love to come, and would also like to know about what else you are doing here in Haiti. So I began to tell the folks at Souls for Souls that another program that we run is our micro entrepreneurship program, where we provide women with small loans to be able to start their own small business. At that time, a couple of weeks later, I then received my first load of shoes. When we think about when we think about sustainability, we often think, keeping shoes and clothing out of our landfills. But there's another important benefit to your shoe donations. Currently, our micro-entrepreneurship program has helped over 350 women in Haiti raise themselves out of poverty. You heard that right, 350 and counting from one pair of shoes. And if you think about that impact of what we've been able to see from your shoe donations, from women who were being evicted from their homes, now able to purchase land and build their own homes. They're not able to send their kids to school. They're not able to provide and afford health care, all with that one shoe donation coming from your closets. I'm always in awe to see what our micro entrepreneurs are able to accomplish when they receive the shoes that are provided to us through our Souls for Souls program, and to see the progress that they're continuously able to do always surpasses my expectations. I can go on, there are so many stories that I can tell you guys about how the shoe has impacted the lives of so many of the Haitian people. But there's one particular story that I want you guys to take note of, and that is the story of Jeanette. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what she has to say. Once again, thank you guys very much, and God bless.
Moi, c'est un marchand de souliers. Mais avant que moi te kon vendre souliers, moi te kon vendre l'autre bagaille la caille moi pour du manger. Moi te kon vendre la caille. Vie a comment qu'elle était pour moi. Moi te kon la caille moi te kon a vendre. Juste pendant ce temps de qu'on a vendre ça la caille moi ouais, li pas ka occuper ti moun yo assez. Moi mettem dehors. Moi al marché tabac, mal chercher souliers pour moi acheter. Juste Sénat à l'acheter, marché tabac, moi rencontré avec Monsieur Samuel, à quel autre ami qui qu'on a chez nous qui parler de lui. C'est difficile pour moi. Juste moi pas de aider monsieur dans caille là. Si ça me da faire, il pas capable voyer ti moun yo pour me bailler corps pour payer machine. Juste pendant ce temps qu'on y a là, moi joindre avec monsieur Samuel bon vendre moi soulier, li bon soulier moi même mal dégagé pour capoton moi un bali. Juste ça permet que moi plus capable occuper famille. Moi payer l'école, les mois faculté arrivé, des parfois moi payer pour petit moi. Ça veut dire moi même caille moi, m'a fait caille moi, juste c'est à cause de monsieur Samuel et marchandise là que liban moi à cause de toute belle famille ça yo moi gagne que moi reconnaître un peu que me pas reconnaître un peu. Juste moi même moun ça yo qui voye sous les baoua, moi toujours prier pour eux. Et c'est pas moi seul nous aider. Nous censés aider aux populations. Chaque temps moi toujours dit les n'a vini juste les n'a vini comme ça me connaît pas connaît. Comprendre? Si me te tant connaît nous t'a pour la plein monde. Grain père soulier ça, yon moun ka bay li. Et puis grain père soulier ça, li bay famille manger, li bay mari manger, li bay petit moi manger et li paye l'école petit moi. Grain père, yon l'autre moun ni ka pa gen aucune importance dans la vie parle, mais moi même dans la vie parle, dans la vie marim, il gen grande importance là-dedans. Yo content. Bon, moi gen yon dame que nous gen pour nous elle nous venir. Bon, madame Joannise, moi été fait maintenant soulier. C'est pendant ce temps, li ak bodak ça s'il ta nous là et sous tête li ta poté. Haïtien go proverbe li toujours dit en bay piti pa chiche. Yon moun ka bay un grain de paix. C'est pas un seul moun qui bay. Ça veut dire yon grain de paix ali ka fait un pile bagay.
I'll do a quick introductions of our panel. Thank you for your patience, you all. Excited to introduce Beth Goldstein, Executive Director, Industry Analyst for Accessories and Footwear, the NPD Group. Welcome, Beth. Karina Lego, joining us from Munich, Germany, Solution Manager for Sustainability, Retail Industry Business Unit at SAP. Kara Watada, Senior Manager, New Business Models for VF Corp, which includes the North Face, Timberland, Vans, Eagle Creek, and many others. Jad Fink, VP, Innovation and Sustainability at Allbirds. And of course, our very own Buddy Teester, President and CEO of Souls for Souls. I'm going to direct some questions to individual panelists, but anyone's welcome to tag in if you have something else to add. And just a reminder to the audience, you can submit questions via the form below in the event access page. So, Jad, you're up. Allbirds does a great job of humanizing sustainability, making it approachable and digestible for consumers. How important is it to have a sustainability story, and what principles or insights from Allbirds' approach can other companies take and apply?
Great. Well, thank you for the question, Nancy and Jamia. And also thank you to Souls for Souls for having me on this panel. It's an honor to be here. Allbirds has been proud partners with Souls for Souls since our founding in 2016. And so our partnership with Souls for Souls has been a really foundational element to the company, to our story. And so thank you for that partnership. Thanks for the chance to be here. And thanks to the other panelists. So for those who aren't familiar with us, learning about Allbirds, we are a lifestyle brand out of headquartered in San Francisco, California, but our heritage is really from New Zealand. And we have a simple mantra: making better things in better ways. And we were really founded out of the search for the answers to two simple questions. Why hadn't there been much innovation in casual footwear for decades? And why wasn't anyone using merino wool, this miracle fiber, this renewable natural miracle fiber, in casual everyday sneakers? And that's where we started, but it's gone on a lot from there. We've gone on to introduce eucalyptus fibers in our shoes. We've developed a sugarcane sneaker foam for not just our shoes, but hundreds of brands are now actively working on shoes with this. It's the first time a carbon negative material was introduced in sneakers. So we try to continually try to bring natural materials, harness them in new exciting ways, and then tell these stories. You know, back to the original kind of point of this session and this question, we absolutely think storytelling is central to the brand, central to the mission. It's been a foundational piece of our strategy from the beginning. We are a founder-led company. Two gentlemen, Tim Brown from New Zealand and Joey Zwillinger from San Francisco. And they said, does the world really need more stuff? And they said, no, but it needs better things. And we think that telling the story about why they even came together to make a company is really important. People these days, they might click around on the website, say, hey, that's a pretty cool product. But we think now the more discerning consumer, the discerning customer is saying, well, tell me about the company. Tell me about you guys. I think people click on our story, our sustainability a lot more than they used to. And I think as some of the preface in Nancy's opening, if you're not starting with a sustainability strategy, it almost feels pretty old-fashioned these days if you're launching a new brand or updating kind of a heritage brand. So we think being able to tell that story about why are you here, why does the world need this brand, and what are you trying to do is really important. And we also try to humanize the materials, humanize the products, rather than just kind of putting together a combination of petrochemicals and slapping a trademark on it to talk about a new flashy sneaker like a lot of the traditional big sneaker companies have done for a long time. We get to tell stories about sheep farmers in New Zealand, and we actually share some similar partners as some of our panelists from VF Corp and North Face and Icebreaker. So we're very excited to be working with countries and similar supply chains to them, because these are the most incredible farmers, incredible stories, and we've been starting to bring some of those stories out online. And so rather than, again, trying to cover up a petrochemical material, we get to tell the stories of specific farmers who talk about, that, hey, we've seen the next generation, our grandkids, we've seen the faces of our grandkids who are going to take over our farms, and they're going to have curly questions for us, and we better have good answers. So, being able to tell these human stories that there is farmers at the beginning of your product is really exciting, and we've gotten a lot of uptake on that from consumers. So anyway, just summarizing it, I think the principle, the takeaway for us is keep it simple, keep it human. There really are people in the supply chain that we're supporting, and the customers are supporting that. You might need to do the hard work. That's the 165-page PDF. but no one really wants to read that. So don't pretend you're done if that's the sustainability story. Find the exciting way in your brand voice to bring it to life. That's what's going to make a difference, not the PDF. And if you're a product company, don't forget to make a great product, right? You know, people ask us about our sustainability all the time, but we always say, if we don't make a great product first, no one cares about how sustainable it is, because people buy great products. And so I think if you can bridge the gap between what people really want to buy and what they feel like they should buy, make that the same thing, then you're unstoppable. So those are our tips and insights on humanizing sustainability stories.
Thank you so much, and thanks for illuminating how emotional resonance really is what grips people and builds on that empathy and connection to sustainable stories. So Beth, I have a question for you. NPD does some really insightful research and analysis. What are the data saying about consumer attitudes around sustainability? And also, how do you expect that to trend as we hopefully transition to a post-COVID world?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jamia, and thanks, Souls for Souls, for having me today. So we've got some, we're doing some, continual consumer research. I've got some from earlier in the year, kind of pre-COVID, and some a little bit more recent, just trying to understand, how consumers, are thinking about it now in light of the pandemic. But what we've gathered is about 5 general conclusions, and one is that we do see that sustainability is evolving into a new way of life, particularly driven by younger consumers, but it really does concern consumers of all ages. We see when we ask like that some of the stats that were scrolling at the beginning prior to the webinar starting, so the questions we ask are formatted a little bit differently, so you get slightly different answers, but they really are aligned about, about half of consumers saying that eco-friendly or sustainable materials are very or somewhat important. Now, some of my research is focused mainly on footwear, and some of it's a little bit more broad. What's interesting is that in the last year, when we've repeated some of these questions, we see that sort of middle bucket that's somewhat important is what's starting to grow. So while there is that portion of the population that already, feels it's very important, we are now starting to pull people from that, I don't really think it's that important, to that very important, and move them up the scale. And importance is highest for that 18 to 24-year-old age group. So it's almost 60% versus, just slightly half overall. Now, the second point is, of course, okay, great. You say it's important, but are you willing to pay for it? And that's always where you get a little the disconnect. But we're starting to see that change as well. Over a third of consumers saying that they're willing to pay a little bit more. And we ask this question very broadly for a reason, because it's hard for consumers to really put into context how much more they would pay, or obviously there's so much variation in types of footwear, so it's hard to do that. So we did, would you pay a little more, a lot more, or you wouldn't pay more? So over a third said they'd pay a little more, and that's up from a quarter last year. And only a very small percentage, about 3%, said that they'd pay a lot more. So you got to get the mindset of where consumers are. But, they understand that, having that, sustainable aspect, the product is, having an impact on society, it's important. But what's interesting here is that the willingness to pay more is highest among more of that millennial age group, where the importance was highest among the older Gen Z, I'm sorry. And what I think there is happening is that those younger consumers are kind of starting to expect that this is almost like standard features, and, maybe not something that they're necessarily, going to pay more for. Sorry, I'm in New York City and I hear a fire engine outside. So if you hear that, I apologize for that. The third point, and, it ties back to what Jad was talking about in the storytelling, is that, more education is needed. Consumers, they are only somewhat aware of a lot of the different brands and materials that are out there on the things that we kind of, tested. When you put a lot out there and you ask them, 30 to 40% of consumers are aware of, some of the brands or some of the materials, but, any one particular and what it, the benefits of it, it's still a little shaky, and that's hard. I mean, the storytelling aspect and the education, getting it out there, is the hardest part. And of course, a lot of brands, have have, their direct to consumer, their websites, they've got social media strategies. But when you're out there more also in a wholesale environment, it's harder to tell that story. The fourth point, and again, tying back to some of the things that have already been said, is that it's more than just the actual product. We kind of started out on the sustainability journey with consumers really understanding more about, okay, now this shoe or this, this sweater is made with, a sustainable material, but it's now moving towards being more about, sustainable models for, long-term impact. And that's a lot of what, the companies in the fashion space are working towards now. Things like environmental causes or reducing waste, water conservation, human rights and fair wages are things that come to the top in importance when we have surveyed consumers more recently. And of course, the social responsibility, that was brought to light, this summer as, the issues of racial, inequality had, really came to the forefront. So that social responsibility, that impact and having a stand really became important. So again, it's really about that, that long-lasting impact to society, and understanding that not everything every brand or company does is going to be perfect. Jad, it's interesting. I've heard Joey Zwillinger talk about the fact that not everything that Allbirds does or other brands do in the sustainability space can be perfect. It's not. If we're it's a direct-to-consumer brand where you're shipping individual boxes of shoes to, everybody's homes. Is that, the most environmentally friendly? Maybe not. But the idea is then what are we doing to offset that? And the idea of becoming, more of the carbon neutral or the carbon, negative type of thing. So it's really about the whole story. And the fifth point is that, yes, and that ties back to the second question that Jamia asked about, how will consumers think about this, in a post-COVID world? We've asked a couple of questions across footwear, accessories, apparel, to kind of gauge how consumers are thinking about it. And, yes, it's still important. About 40% of consumers said it was as important to them now as it was prior to the pandemic. In the short term, maybe we're a little bit more focused on our immediate health and safety, and that may mean using some more, disposable items, more than we would have, in the past. But in the long run, the idea of sustainability really fits under this overall umbrella of, health and wellness of ourselves, of society, which I think is going to be, a big priority moving forward as we come out of the pandemic. And of course, we're also getting into holiday, and we've asked questions. Consumers tell us that it's more important than it has been in prior years to them to give gifts that give back. So whether the gift, whether it's a product that is, using sustainable materials or locally sourced or, donations to charities. So, that whole package remains very important.
Thank you. And speaking of behavior, Kara, you have a lot of experience understanding consumer behavior and then applying that knowledge to bring value to people's lives. Let's talk about re-commerce, which has really grown into a movement. What have you learned about user behavior in re-commerce? And for a brand, does a re-commerce business cannibalize their primary business?
Yeah, really great question. And again, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be with such great company and especially be supporting Souls for Souls on their mission. So specifically focusing on your question, as Beth mentioned, a lot of brands are starting to really lean into these more sustainable business models. And one in particular is re-commerce that here at VF, we've done a lot of work in really starting to accelerate that forward within some of our brands. My role in particular, I sit within our strategy and growth platforms team. So I get the fortunate job of I get to actually interact with many of our brands. I don't just sit at one of them. And that really gives me, the ability to look full broadly across multiple brands and across multiple product categories. I'm so excited to be here to talk about re-commerce. But really talking about that model, if you think about it, re-commerce has been around for quite some time. Re-commerce maybe just didn't used to be called re-commerce in itself. We probably called it something else. But I'm sure many of us on this call have either bought something used or at least know somebody who has. Over time, traditional, garage sale and brick and mortar stores such as Goodwill or Salvation Army, they've really continued to evolve more into digital environments, primarily due to consumer demand. And by doing so, they've been able to really broaden the reach and enable the business model as e-commerce in itself to be more conducive for greater value exchange between the platforms and the users that engage with them. Some of the early digital pioneers, such as eBay and Craigslist, which many of us probably know who they are or what they do, they actually found a way to unlock access to goods beyond, the comfort of one's neighborhood or even city. That in itself really enabled tremendous growth within the peer-to-peer network, and also enabled greater search capabilities for buyers. All of this increase in value is really what has allowed the e-commerce model to prosper from within. Fast forward though, over the past few years, the introduction of newcomers such as Poshmark and ThredUp, they've also continued to accelerate the growth within the e-commerce space. All of this has really been pushed forward from a number of strong tailwinds. One in particular is COVID over the past, 10, 11 months. Actually 12 months is probably by now. But this type of impressive growth really wouldn't be possible without a change in actual user behavior. And you may be actually thinking, what do I mean by user behavior? The actual act of shopping in itself hasn't changed. We as humans, we are actually really good at acquiring newer users, right? That's not something that's changed. But what has changed is when people begin to think about what they need and then taking that information, and that actually moves them into a mindset of how they buy and where they buy. And so, for example, nowadays users are becoming actually a lot more thriftier. Whether you yourself have been impacted financially by the current situation with COVID, you're still probably taking a step back and thinking about, I want something, I need something, I can probably get it somewhere else, maybe than my go-to place that I usually go to. That type of change is really making users think about the price value exchange of the goods that they're bringing into their lives or actually removing from their lives in itself. Another example is users are actually deprioritizing more materialistic items. It looks like most of us are at home, right, or have been spending a lot more time at home than we probably have historically. And we're starting to look around and realize we may not need as much of the items that we have in our hands. Maybe we want to use that exchange and value of that item to create new experiences in our life, right? Or save money for when there is a time to actually go out and explore a little bit more safely in doing so. So again, that has really changed the way in which users are thinking about how they shop. Another example that I think has really changed actually over the past probably 10 years is there's no longer this negative stigmatism associated with used items. Beforehand, at least when I was growing up, I always heard like, they're kind of old, they're kind of grungy, maybe dirty. But instead, more recently, the narrative has really changed to a more clean, restorative, second life, even one of a kind type story with youth. And that change in positioning itself has now made the active by youth a lot more appealing, a lot more accessible, and in some cases even more trustworthy, depending on which platform you're actually looking to engage with. So one last, I guess, example that I would probably throw out there is there's a saying that goes something along the lines of one man's trash is another man's treasure. While I don't necessarily love the word trash in that statement, I would say that the idea behind the statement is still true, right? Long gone are the days where if you no longer have a need or want an item, you just dispose of it. Nowadays, you are really starting to understand that while there may be no more value for yourself in that item, there is absolutely additional value for somebody else in that item. And that's really what Souls for Souls has done and enabled worldwide, which I think is fantastic and is, again, another supportive factor in how user behavior has changed and has really propelled this model moving forward. I want to make sure that I address your other question too, which is does e-commerce business or brand cannibalize their primary business? And I actually get this question a lot from within our own brands and also other brands that I engage with. And to be honest, overall, from what we've seen within our own businesses and even within the market, e-commerce actually plays really nicely with a brand's primary business. And there's a few reasons for why that is. The first is really, if you think about a primary brand's unique value proposition to a user, right? That differs from a e-commerce business. So to put it into perspective, a primary business is typically known for the new releases, the latest and greatest, right? Like users are coming to that brand for a particular reason or a particular item. If you shift your look to a e-commerce business usually doesn't have brand new product launches. Instead, they're actually offering more collection items, more unique finds, the classic or iconic items. So again, those two products and the value propositions within those really target two different user bases. So from a primary brand's perspective, you're not cannibalizing your own business by offering a e-commerce business. Another really strong example of why e-commerce is not cannibalize primary business is if you think about product development, right? You are actually able to introduce additional products into your offering without actually going through true new product development. So it allows a primary business to extend a variety of high quality products at various price points. So for a primary business, you can continue to launch your new products and your new collections, right, at a reasonable price point. In addition to that, for e-commerce business, you can continue to offer really high quality goods, but at a discounted price. So again, you've just now broadened your breadth of product offering to your users without actually discounting everything across the board. So those are just two examples of really how a e-commerce business can fit nicely within a primary business and allows a brand to really extend the reach of users and grow their business overall.
Thank you so much, Kara.
Yeah.
So now we are going to move to Karina and talk a little bit about your focus at SAP in sustainability and the retail fashion space. And I'm going to ask you two questions. Which strategic priorities for sustainability does SAP see as most relevant for fashion retailing? And what examples can you share with us?
So great question. Thanks, Jamia, and also Souls for Souls for having me today. And hey, how great it is to be part of this great company here today. Thanks. Now to your question about SAP and strategic priorities within fashion retailing. That, of course, also includes the footwear industry. So let me maybe just start by emphasizing that we see sustainability, and I think you all agree with me, sustainability needs to be implemented into our end-to-end thinking. And in turn, of course, also into the end-to-end fashion and retailing processes. And it's not more just an add-on. So we see in the what we see is actually there is a sustainability paradigm shift. We see that fashion industry is under scrutiny from both consumers and regulators. You have just stated that fashion brands are a major contributor towards carbon emissions, which puts also them into a very powerful position to actually make changes that drive sustainability across their entire supply base. And then, of course, purpose-driven retail. So the next generation of consumers are looking for fashion brands that align with their values and are willing to walk the talk. So commitment to a purpose has become as important as a fashion brand's digital experience. And so the future of fashion retailing is about thoughtful curation of sustainable products and brands that align with their mission and provide actually a trusted engagement with their consumer base. So sustainability is vital for fashion brands' competitiveness, and I think we all agree to that. So now, from an SAP perspective, now technology is an enabler for fashion brands' sustainability agenda. We know that disruptive technologies play a key role as an amplifier in scaling and making sustainable and circular business models more efficient and effective. From SAP's side, SAP is addressing the challenges of sustainability through our solutions, and we enable our fashion and retail customers to go even beyond measuring top and bottom line results to actually include this new dimension of success, sustainability management. So SAP, as you may be aware of, is highly investing into sustainability, making value chains and business even more sustainable through technology. SAP helps fashion brands to become a sustainable, intelligent enterprise. And now, how can we go forward with our fashion customers towards sustainable progress? For this, we have set out our vision and strategic priorities to actually drive sustainability within fashion retailing. With, of course, SAP capabilities that enable sustainability goals and opportunities for them. Now, breaking it down to what we think are the 4 key priorities that we see that enable sustainability in retail. And this is a sustainable brand, a circular economy. We need to talk about less waste and reduced emissions. So let me go into a little bit more detail, exemplifying that. The first priority I have pointed out is sustainable brand. Sustainable brand is a higher ideal, a higher aim to be addressing social inclusion, environmental protection, and economic growth. So what sustainability related themes are included in, and once we be talking about sustainable brand, is enhancing brand value and reputation, increasing the demand and customer loyalty. So consumers consider sustainability as part of their purchasing decisions. So we're talking about animal welfare, no child labor, for example. Also, fashion retailers need to become a role model, a market leader for environment, health, safety, integrity. And collaborating is key. Collaborative activities with all value chain partners for positive sustainable impact, driving sustainable circular business models. Now, coming to the second priority, I've pointed out circular economy. So we know that clothes and shoes are an everyday necessity and for many an important aspect of self-expression. Yet the way clothes are made and used today is extremely wasteful. We know that. It's very much polluting. Making circular fashion or making fashion a circular is an initiative by what we know the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who very much promotes a circular economy. And it drives a collaboration between fashion industry leaders and other key stakeholders, and that includes SAP, to create circular fashion economy. Its ambition is to ensure that clothes are made from safe, renewable materials. New business models increase the use, and old clothes are turned into new ones. So the circular economy is a prominent economic model for sustainable development and plays a key role also in the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So promoted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, as I just said, SAP is a CE 100 member and teaming up in a collaborative spirit with our fashion brands, our leading fashion brands, triggering a circular economy. So to drive circular fashion, where nothing is wasted, everything lasts longer, is shared, reused, repaired, recycled, reducing pressure on natural resources, and also bringing economic and social benefits. We're addressing here, as just pointed out, network collaboration. We addressing engagement with customers to creating exciting opportunities also for fashion brands, for fashion retailers. We are addressing items in use, like we talking about sharing, renting, subscription models, where we refurbish, remanufacture items, fashion items, or also after use, source for source, donation, reselling, recycling, upcycling. We're talking about engaging value chain partners, customers. We're talking about responsible sourcing and marketplace, responsible production, responsible consumption, resource recovery, and reuse. Now I'm coming to the two more sustainable principles. What I pointed out are 4 key priorities which we see. That's a sustainable brand, a circular economy, and the 2 others are actually less waste and reduced emissions. So let's talk about less waste. We are addressing here the improving of waste management, so return recycling, driving green consumerism through efficiency and sustainability. We are dealing with tremendous growth and returns. We are addressing new revenue streams, and we understand where waste hotspots are actually. And of course, reduced emission as a key priority that we see once talking to fashion brands about sustainability. And that addresses knowing emissions origins, through pollution tracking that drives the ability to decrease actually the emissions in transportation and warehouse management. We are addressing sustainability reporting, which includes the carbon accounting along the value chain that supports visibility, and of course empowering consumers making responsible buying decisions. So these four key priorities I have just pointed out: reduced emission, less waste, as principles triggering a circular fashion economy through sustainable circular business models towards becoming actually a sustainable brand. So this begs the question, how is sustainability already embedded? Where are fashion brands falling short? How do they need to engage with? Who do they need to engage with? How do fashion brands need to bring sustainability efforts, activities, engagement into greater focus? And this is just four more thoughts here too. This reduce and formulation of packaging, for example, also needs to be addressed. Materials to address healthy, safety, environment. We need to revamp the supply chain, suppliers, partners, to create visibility, transparency, also of the reverse supply chain once we're taking the items back from the end consumer. Diversifying the product portfolio to extend sustainable product and service offerings. We need to update and change existing business models to run sustainable circular loop scenarios, circular economy to be triggered. And we need to integrate sustainability into customer touchpoints and making marketing activities to actually raise awareness and encourage also them to actually towards forming the end consumer circular habits, of returning actually the items and bringing them back into the loops. So brands that are able, and we think that are able to influence consumers' behaviors and generate a demand for sustainable products will be able to reduce cost and also create new business opportunities that, of course, respects the limits of our planet and supporting social inclusion. So again, as said, sustainability needs to be implemented into an end-to-end fashion retailing processes, triggered by an end-to-end thinking. And this is how we at SAP with our fashion industry ecosystem are addressing sustainability and sustainable fashion retailing and its priorities. So thank you for this great question, Jameen.
Thank you so much, Karina. And speaking of partnerships, I'm really excited to connect what you were just sharing and all of your impactful work with Buddy's work at Souls for Souls, and wanted to talk about how Souls for Souls partners with brands, retailers, and even logistics and service companies to collect shoes and clothing, as well as fundraising initiatives. How can businesses benefit from partnering with a nonprofit? And specifically, how can a partnership contribute to a compelling sustainability story? I just learned from Karina more about how that partnership works, but I'd love to hear your perspective too.
Sure. Well, I learned a long time ago that if you are not the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the right room. And today I definitely feel like that. There's a lot of expertise on this phone. And so I appreciate everybody sharing that. And I think for the Souls for Souls part of this story, and it's been hinted at a little bit here, is there is a lot of work done upstream on engineering and chemistry and manufacturing, because that's where the biggest bang for the buck on many of these things that Jad, Beth, Kara, and Karina have all talked about. And one of the hardest parts is the consumer side. How do you change behavior? How do you get people to do things that don't necessarily have any kind of economic value that they could, whether that's to donate something or to think differently about how they dispose of it. And I think that is where Souls for Souls comes in. When Jad mentioned we started working with Allbirds at the very beginning back in 2016, I think it's a great example. From the beginning, they needed to know that they could tell the whole story. What happens when somebody returns it? What really happens? And that's a hard problem to solve. I think not-for-profits are often uniquely positioned to do that because they can have other factors they consider just than what's the financial consideration. And so that's been a great partnership from the beginning because we could clearly tell a story about how those products get put to really good use, and it allowed Allbirds to say with confidence, hey, we really thought this whole chain through. So I think that's a great example of one. And Kara mentioned a little bit with re-commerce. Well, we have begun working with mostly the North Face, but some other VF brands across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and North America, to make it easy for consumers to bring back those things. Some of that gets resold in the Souls for Souls micro enterprise model to help people create jobs that you heard Sam talk about. Some of it we're figuring out how to recycle, and some of it we're still talking with Eagle Creek and other brands at VF as they're trying to figure out what's the rest of that story from the consumer side. So I do think that the focus of this panel today is the human face, and that's what, it's hard to tell a story around how do you reduce carbon emissions and all this sort of stuff, because it seems super technical and far away from, you know, what each of us as an individual can do. But it is not hard to tell the story of, when you're finished with this, here are the ways that it can be used, and here's how to make it easy. So I think it's compelling inside the footwear and apparel industries, and that's what we have the experts that we do. But I would say one of the biggest surprises for us in the last 9 or 10 months with COVID, and we're trying to figure out what our response to is, are there fewer shoes? People aren't volunteering to do shoe drives. What does all that mean? At the same time, we've probably had more calls from corporate partners or potential corporate partners outside of footwear and apparel who say, we want to have a sustainability story for our company. And so it's not just the obvious candidates. So we work with a financial services company, a publicly traded company called Voya that manages retirement services and that sort of stuff. They really care about sustainability. So they do lots of things internally to be more efficient, have less waste, but they also do a lot to reach out to their employees. And one of the things is they've done a shoe drive. They collected about 10,000 pairs of shoes. And the other part, and we've done this with other partners like DSW, is show people the results. So you can tell those stories and they're important, have to do that. But when we can take a Voya employee or a DSW employee and show them what's going on in Haiti, you know, they get to meet Sam and they meet the women like Jeanette and Joanice, and they look them in the eye and they understand, like, I get the story, but I see where you were living and I see what you're doing now. That makes the story real. And I think, you know, Jad said at the beginning, you have to have a story, but the more concrete that you can make it, where it's not, there is some person in Honduras or Haiti or Malawi, but here is this woman who has this story, really helps make it real. And so I think that's the big, I know that's a part of what we pitch at Souls for Souls, but I think lots of those partnerships with not-for-profits, I'll give you another example, is Bridgestone. Like, here's a giant multinational, multi-billion-dollar company, and yet they want to partner with a not-for-profit to figure out how to reuse their tires into footwear, right? It's really hard. Everybody's trying to figure it out. But it just tells me that there is an interesting intersection between the for-profit and not-for-profit world where both sides benefit by coming up with creative partnerships that neither one of us on our own could probably pull off, but together we have a shot at making it happen.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all your work. I just realized on this call that I think I have a donation for you after COVID. And so thank you for inspiring me and everyone else who's listening. So I also wanted to just thank our amazing panelists for this conversation. I wish it could be much longer, and I've learned much. And before we close, I wanted to let Allison from the audience get in the last word from our panel and ask this question. People in management see the need for sustainability, but are not always prepared to spend the money on it. How can I persuade those around me that sustainability is worth it? Buddy, do you have an answer for that? I'm thinking you probably get this question a lot in your seat.
So I think and there are other perspectives here probably worth sharing, Jamia, but I think for us, an example is often one of the biggest costs is shipping the product, whether that's getting it to Souls for Souls in one of our warehouses or getting it to somebody like Sam. And so we've done a couple of things. We've begun a partnership with XPO, which is a global logistics company, and it's an important part. They're experts at it, and they've gone from like, hey, you could be a customer, to this is a great way to engage our employees around something they're really expert about. So I think there are some very direct sort of things. But I think also thinking about how do we convince companies like DSW and Zappos who pay the cost of shipping product for their customers to Souls for Souls. It's a big number. Like, they won't tell us what the number is. It's big enough that they don't want that to be out in the world. But it does tell me that they are looking at that as a marketing cost. They're looking at that as a customer loyalty cost. And not just a one-way thing. They see real benefit. And so I think for us, one way to persuade people is to be able to bring those stories back, whether that's on something internal that no customer will ever see, or something like, some meeting Sam and Jeanette, where you can really bring those stories back. That's what's going to convince us. Data takes you so far, but if you can't make it human, I think your persuasion is really reduced.
I like to make the data human. Does anyone else want to have a brief last word before we turn it over to Nancy? Thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation. I'm so grateful to be in partnership with you, and all of us have our marching orders moving forward. Thank you. And thank you, Nancy, for closing us out of a great discourse.
Of course. Thank you, Jamia. And I want to say a special and big thank you to every one of our speakers and panelists. It's unbelievable to see this collaborative come together, all these groups from all these different parts of industry and social well-being and coming together. Jad said, we just need better product, but he really talked about the stories of these farmers and passing on from generation to generation, humanizing where that product is coming from. Beth talked about more education being needed, but ultimately social responsibility is here and will have a long-lasting impact on people. Kara with the re-commerce talked about adding value and extending the life of product. And Karina mentioned how companies are now looking at not just top and bottom line, but really this notion of social inclusion. And what's awesome about Souls for Souls is it wraps all of that together. And we saw it with our partnership through Sam. He talked about in his video, one pair of shoes ultimately changed the lives of 350 women. It enabled them to feed their families. Jeanette talked about, to you and I, it might just be one pair of shoes, but for her, it was life altering. And that's the power of this collective coming together, creating that full circle of life and humanity for product and purpose. And so we're so grateful for you guys to have been here and to have listened to this conversation. While those are all the questions that we had time for today, please be on the lookout for an event recap from the Souls for Souls team. We'll answer all the questions that were typed into the chat and much more. And if you would like to learn more about how your business can benefit from a partnership with Souls for Souls or any other questions, please feel free to email me directly at nancy@soulsforsouls.org. And we'll hope to see you at next quarter's Partner for Impact event, which will be about empowering women and gender equality. Have a great day.